Doing a simple little wet fly today. This is called the Mallard. This is also from Ray Bergman's book, Trout. I like this little fly because of the darker colors on it. It's also primarily made out of mallard flank. This is it's a gray mallard flank that's been dyed a brown color. And the tail and the wing are both made out of mallard. It also has a collared hackle on it instead of a throat. I've had a number of people that have asked me to demonstrate that in some flies, the collared hackles, because they can be a little bit more challenging, I think, in a way than the throats. So this is just a simple little fly, some yellow wool for the body and some gold tinsel for the tip and the rib. And that's the Mallard. I'll go ahead and get started. So I've got my hook on the vise. This is a Mustad 3399 in a size 6. It's a traditional wet fly hook. As I start the Mallard, I'm going to debarb the hook. And I'll attach my thread. Even though I have a yarn body, it's just it's a wool body, but I'm going to use a yellow yarn. Still going to start with a white. This is a Danville 6/0 in white because I don't want to darken up anything underneath that body when it gets wet. I'll attach my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. I've already waxed this thread. I'm going to advance this down to just past the point of the hook. And then I'll tie in the tip. The tip and the rib are a gold tinsel. I'm using a Danville's. This is a number 14 silver and gold tinsel. I'm going to tie the tinsel with the silver side up. That way it will flip over to the gold side as I apply the tag and the rib. I get 3 or 4 wraps to secure that in. Turn the hook over. 4 wraps down, 4 wraps back up, and that will put the tip in. The tail on the Mallard is mallard flank. Both the tail and the wing are mallard flank. I'm using this is a gray mallard flank that's dyed brown. It calls for a brown mallard. You want to just find a feather. It really doesn't do well for a wing or anything like this one right here. It has some broken up tips. This is fairly even here. Just where you can get maybe about a dozen barbs, something like this. Peel those out, and that's what we'll use for a tail. Get those tips even. We're going to measure that about a shank length long and tie that in. And then we'll trim away the excess so that this is the length of the body. I'll put in my rib next. Same tinsel that I've used before, the size 14 Danville. I'm going to tie that in on the side and pull that back the length of the body so that the silver is facing outward. As I mentioned, I'm using some yellow wool is what the body is, and I'm just using this wool yarn. It's a little bit easier. Cut a strip I should say cut a length, maybe 5 inches or so. This has 4 strands in it, and I don't need all 4 for this. Body's going to be a little bit heavy, in my opinion, if I use all 4. So I'm just going to peel out 2 of these. And then I'll tie that in so that that is going to be the length of the body. And I shall secure this to the shank. Then I'll apply the body and the rib. You want to untwist this, at least I do. When I put this in, I want to just have this kind of flat. Otherwise, it ends up looking a little more corded than I care for. With the body and the rib applied, I will now change over to my black thread. I'm using a Danville 6/0 in black. Put a little bit of wax on this. Some of this wool fuzz, if you want, if it sticks out too much, you can trim some of that back. The whole fly is rather buggy looking with a collared hackle on it and the brown mallard, so I don't generally get too concerned about that. Bring my thread back to the back side of the head space here, and we'll tie in our wing. The wing for the mallard, as I mentioned, is also mallard flank. I'm going to use just a brown dyed mallard flank. This particular feather that I'm going to use a technique where I clip out the center here and I fold this back together. This particular feather is too pointed. Normally I'd rather have it flatter across the top here, but if I trim out this section right here, I end up with more usable feathers, or I should say barbs, on each side for a wing on this. Sometimes you have to hunt through a pack of loose mallard flank just to find those feathers that you can make work. So I've clipped that out, probably clip a little bit more. Save these little pieces too, because this, you've got, some right here that there's enough right there for a tail for another fly. So I've got that clipped out. I'm going to fold this together. Sometimes they work. This one's not bad. Sometimes they don't. Even when you get them folded together, they are too sparse, or they're just too not full enough. A few barbs here I'm going to peel off that are kind of short. But I think this is workable. So I'm going to measure that so that the tip goes of the tail about halfway down. I should say the tip of the wing goes about halfway down the tail. A little pinch and loop. Anchor that in, get a few securing wraps in there, and we'll take a look at it. That's pretty good. A lot of your mallard, the barb tips, I should say, are kind of rough, and that one definitely is. But again, this whole fly right here, kind of buggy looking. It's not real super clean. It's not, a nice crisp little wet fly. I think it is something more to have a lot of action in the water, a lot of movement, and just look rather buggy. So now we'll put our hackle on. For the hackle, I'm using just a brown hen. The recipe calls for a brown hackle. I like the hen. This is a nice little hen neck here. I like the hen because it is nice and soft. It's not quite as stiff as rooster. I'll isolate the tip on this. I'm going to be applying this as a collar, not as a throat. So I want to find somewhere where the last few barbs that I'm going to apply on here for that last wrap or two are going to be about the length from the head to, I like them to be about the mid portion of the throat back here past the point of the hook. So I'll stroke back those barbs, isolating the tip here. I'll secure the tip of that feather in. It's very important that you, after putting in the wings, you clean up that head space so it's nice and smooth, so that you have a nice smooth area to apply your hackle on. My hackle pliers out. I generally get about 4 wraps, maybe 5. I don't want it to look too full. The way that I apply this and then secure it in, I'm going to use the head of the fly as a means to keep those barbs angled backwards. So we get those 4 wraps in. I'm going to secure it. Very important right here to keep thread tension, because if I ease up this thread at all, this whole hackle is going to start to unwind. You could put a couple wraps in there if you want to secure that a little more. I get 1 in there and then reach up, stroking all those back. I'll start to put the head in, and I'm working my way from right behind the eye of the hook backwards. Just going to get a head in here. It's maybe about an eye length long, not anything really big. That secures all this down. I can then break away the rest of that hackle, flatten my thread, and put in a whip finish. Again, that secures that hackle down, and it also binds it in so it's in more of a rearward direction. Cut away my thread. Take a look at that collar. You can see those barbs are just about the right length. They're going to go back just past the point of the hook into the throat space. And with that brown mallard, all of that is going to have a lot of movement in the water as well as look awfully buggy. A little bit of head cement on both sides there. I'll come back in a moment and put some black lacquer on that to finish off the mallard. So there's the mallard. Just a fun little fly if you got a lot of mallard flank around. Brown mallard is the traditional for the mallard, I think. At least that's the recipe in Ray Bergman's book. But I'm certain you could use some other kinds of mallard and even some other kind of colored yarn if you want, just to change it up a little bit. It would be interesting to do this in maybe not quite so brown, but even the brown and like a light green body, or maybe a caddis or something like that. So anyway, that is the mallard wet fly. Thanks for watching today.
Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.